Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went in there? Or maybe you've desperately tried to recall an actor's name, even though you just saw them on screen. It's a familiar feeling, isn't it? And when that happens, a rather worrying thought might creep into your mind. What if this isn't just tiredness? What if it's something more serious? That fear is entirely understandable because the line between everyday absent-mindedness and the first signs of Alzheimer's can seem incredibly fine. But in reality, the difference is vast. Today, we're going to put those worries to rest and get clarity on this issue once and for all. I'll show you the 5 key, fundamental distinctions between normal forgetfulness and the truly concerning symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. I promise you after this video, you will look at your own memory in a completely new light. And please stick with us right to the end, because that final difference is often mistaken for just a personality trait, when in fact, it can be a vital warning sign. Now, before we start comparing symptoms, let's quickly understand what memory is and why it occasionally fails us. Imagine your brain as a giant library. Every day you're adding new books, events, names, facts. As you get older, the librarian, that's your brain, becomes a little slower. Sometimes they put a book on the wrong shelf, and it simply takes you a bit longer to locate it. That is normal, age-related forgetfulness, a temporary issue with information retrieval. Alzheimer's disease, however, is a completely different story. It's not a slow librarian. It's a process that literally destroys the books and the shelves themselves. Neurons in the brain are damaged and die. The information isn't just misplaced temporarily, it vanishes forever. So it's crucial to grasp this distinction. Normal forgetfulness is a glitch in the search engine, while Alzheimer's is the outright destruction of the archive. And now let's look at how this manifests in real life. Right, the first crucial difference we need to focus on. Forgetting details versus completely forgetting an entire event. Let's think of a typical scenario. Say you had a good chat with a friend on the phone recently. Now, if it's just normal, run-of-the-mill, age-related forgetfulness, you might misplace one specific element of that conversation. For instance, you can't quite remember the name of that charming little restaurant your friend recommended, but you absolutely recall the conversation itself, the general subject, and how you felt during the chat. You have the gist of it. The brain simply slipped up on a minor detail, but the big picture, the overall event, remains perfectly intact. Think of it like a film where they've cut out one completely insignificant line. The plot certainly hasn't suffered, has it? You might even say to yourself, I know for a fact we were talking about food, but the name of the place has completely flown out of my head. And honestly, that is a perfectly normal process. It happens to all of us, especially when we're tired or dealing with too much information. Our brain is simply trying to optimize its storage, you see, deciding to discard what it deems non-essential. Let's now look at this same situation through the eyes of someone experiencing the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. They won't just forget the name of the restaurant. They might completely forget the telephone conversation ever happened. If you ask them, do you remember talking to Alex yesterday? They will genuinely be surprised and insist that no such conversation took place. For them, that event was simply not retained. It's as if it was wiped clean, and no amount of reminding will help recover that memory. This happens because the disease attacks the hippocampus, the area of the brain responsible for forming new memories. The information simply isn't written to the hard drive. Visually, you can think of it this way. With typical forgetfulness, you're searching for a file on your computer and can't find it, but you know it's stored somewhere. With Alzheimer's, the system never even attempted to save that file in the first place. This is the fundamental difference, and it impacts the person's entire life, because their reality is built upon these daily, erased events. Let's delve a little deeper into this mechanism. When a healthy brain occasionally forgets something, it usually boils down to a problem with either consolidation or retrieval. Perhaps you were distracted at the moment the information came in, and it didn't have a chance to properly cement itself. Or perhaps the neural pathways leading to that memory have just temporarily weakened. But the memory itself, the book, in the library, is completely whole. You simply need the right key or clue to locate it. If a friend reminds you, "We were discussing Italian cuisine," you might suddenly exclaim, "Oh yes, I've got it." In a person with Alzheimer's disease, however, this entire process is broken down at the very root. The amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles, which are hallmarks of the disease, physically destroy the synapses, the vital connections between the neurons. The information can't even be transmitted properly, let alone successfully stored. That's why simple reminders or prompts won't work. It's like trying to open a file on a computer that has been permanently deleted. The data is simply no longer there. To help us understand this key distinction, let's stick with a simple analogy. Imagine your memory is like a trusty old camera. With normal forgetfulness, you've taken the photo, but it's just slightly out of focus. You can make out the general shapes, the people, the location, but some small detail in the background is blurry. Perhaps you can't quite read the sign on the shop window. It's a nuisance, certainly, but the picture is there. Now, with Alzheimer's disease, you press the shutter button, but the lens cap was closed the entire time. There is simply no photo, just emptiness, and no matter how hard you try to sharpen the image, you won't see anything, because nothing was captured in the first place. This inability to form new lasting memories is precisely one of the earliest and most destructive symptoms of the disease. These aren't just lapses in memory, they are lapses in life itself, where entire chunks of a day or a whole week simply cease to exist for the person experiencing them. Now then, let's move on to the second important difference. This one is all about our sense of direction and how we find our way around. Think about that common old situation. You walk into a room, stop dead for a second, and suddenly haven't the faintest idea why you went in there. That is absolutely universal. What do you do in that situation? You either walk straight back to the room you came from, or you mentally retrace your steps. You think, "Now I was sitting in the kitchen having my cup of tea, and I realised I needed to grab my book." And just like that, the purpose pops back into your head. Your ability to navigate and use your logic helps you reboot the task. Your internal GPS is functioning just fine. It was simply a momentary glitch in setting the destination. This is completely harmless, mind you, and usually linked to trying to juggle too many things at once, or simply being a bit tired. Your brain just switched tracks, and the original impulse got lost. But you can easily bring it back because the overall navigation system is absolutely sound. When we talk about Alzheimer's disease, it's far more complicated than simple forgetfulness. It's not just forgetting why you entered a room. It's losing the fundamental ability to navigate space and time itself. Someone might get completely lost on a street they've walked down for 20 years. They might simply pop down to the corner shop and suddenly be unable to find their way back home. Familiar places become strange and deeply frightening. This isn't just a bit of forgetfulness. It's actually the failure of the parts of the brain responsible for creating that essential mental map of the world around us. This profound confusion also shows up in their sense of time. They might not know what day of the week it is, the month, or even the current year. They might genuinely believe it's 1985 and start getting ready for a job they retired from years ago. It's a state of deep bewilderment where the world suddenly stops making sense and loses all predictability. To picture this, imagine if your sat-nav suddenly lost all its mapping data. Why does this happen? Well, the truth is, Alzheimer's disease often begins by affecting the parietal lobes of the brain. These crucial areas are what handle our spatial awareness. That's things like judging distance, recognizing familiar objects, and knowing how to follow a map. When these neural networks start to break down, the person effectively loses the ability to properly read the world around them. They might see their own house, for example, but fail to connect it to their mental map of the neighbourhood. They look at a calendar, but the numbers and month names suddenly stop making logical sense. This is a cognitive deficit that goes well beyond simple forgetfulness. So, if an elderly relative misses a turning in an unfamiliar city just once, that could simply be stress or ordinary confusion. But If they start getting lost in their own garden or their immediate surroundings, that is a very serious and worrying symptom that requires immediate specialist attention. This isn't just senior moments or getting a bit vague. This is a clear sign of underlying organic brain damage. Let's tackle a very common and frankly dangerous misconception: the idea that old people just get easily lost. That's a misleading assumption. True enough, reaction times do tend to slow down as we age, and mastering a new route or system might take a little longer. But becoming disoriented or lost in a familiar, well-known environment, that is absolutely not normal. That is a major red flag. Think of it like driving. A senior driver might move slower, perhaps park more cautiously. That's just standard adjustment. But if that person gets in the car and suddenly can't figure out how to drive home, or confuses the accelerator pedal and the brake, that isn't simply old age. That's a sign of a medical condition. Spatial orientation works exactly the same way. Forgetting an apartment number in a large block of flats, that happens to anyone. But forgetting which floor you live on, or not recognizing the door to your own home, that is an entirely different matter. It is vital that we distinguish between minor, manageable dips in cognitive flexibility and the complete breakdown of essential orientation skills. The third key difference, and one that often causes confusion, involves issues with speech. With normal forgetfulness, we all experience that so-called tip of the tongue phenomenon. You're trying desperately to recall the name of an actor, the title of a book, or some specialized term. You absolutely know the word. You can describe it. You might even know the letter it starts with, but the word itself simply won't materialize. It's terribly frustrating, of course, but eventually you either recall it a little later, or just a tiny prompt is enough to bring it back. Your vocabulary, you see, is perfectly intact. It's just that access to that specific file is temporarily blocked. This happens because the connection between the concept and its spoken label has momentarily weakened. Your brain is trying to locate the right file, but it just can't open it straight away. But the crucial point here, and this is vital, is that you absolutely understand what it is you are trying to say. When dealing with Alzheimer's disease, the problems with speech take on a completely different nature. It's much more complex than just struggling to find the right word. The individual actually starts to lose their core vocabulary itself. They might replace the correct term with one that is similar in meaning or sound, or one that merely describes the item's function. For example, instead of asking for their watch, they might refer to it as that little time teller thing on my wrist. They often rely on very simple, fragmented phrases. Very frequently, these individuals will stop abruptly mid-sentence because they have completely lost their train of thought and forgotten what they intended to say. Their speech becomes quite limited, and they find it difficult both to participate in a dialogue and to follow the thought process of the person speaking to them. They aren't simply forgetting the word, they are forgetting the concept or the meaning that the word represents. Over time, this deterioration can lead to complete silence, as the sheer process of constructing a sentence becomes an overwhelming task. This isn't a temporary lapse, it is a progressive and steady breakdown of the specific speech centers in the brain. The root of these speech difficulties, which doctors call aphasia, when dealing with Alzheimer's disease, lies in the damage that occurs in the temporal and frontal parts of the brain. This is precisely where we find Wernicke's center, responsible for understanding what we hear, and Broca's center, which handles producing the speech ourselves. When these crucial parts start to degrade, the entire language system breaks down. They won't just struggle to speak, they also lose the ability to grasp complex sentences, follow simple instructions, or even get a joke. Their way of communicating with the world often shrinks down to the most basic, simple structures. Just imagine trying to use a dictionary where half the pages have been ripped out and the definitions on the remaining ones have been completely rubbed off. You might see the word, but you can't grasp its meaning or find a suitable synonym. That gives you a picture of the linguistic confusion someone with dementia faces. So when your loved one begins to experience serious communication difficulties, please remember, it's not stubbornness or idleness, it's a genuine symptom of the illness itself. Let's take a clear example now. Just to make the difference absolutely crystal clear, imagine two different people wanting to ask you for a simple screwdriver. The person experiencing normal, everyday forgetfulness might say, "Could you pass me that thing, please? The one for tightening up the screws. You know, that metal shaft with a handle." Good heavens, the name's completely gone. They are describing the item clearly and its function, and crucially, they know that they've forgotten the specific word. They can still communicate effectively, even with that temporary hiccup. The person with Alzheimer's, however, might only manage, "Give me that thing for the job, to turn it. It's over there." Their speech is fractured and they rely on these vague, general filler words because the actual names and specific vocabulary have simply vanished from their mind. They can't describe the item because the vital connection between the object itself, its name, and its actual function has been disrupted in the brain. That is the fundamental difference, searching for a word versus having lost the word entirely. The fourth key difference, then, is the quality of the decisions we make. We all make errors from time to time, don't we? It's inevitable that we occasionally make the wrong call. For instance, you might buy something rather expensive on impulse, driven by the emotion of the moment, and then kick yourself later for having done it. Or perhaps you forget to pay a bill until it's overdue and end up incurring a late fee or a penalty charge. These things happen. They are simply part of the human experience. After such a blunder, you'll naturally learn your lesson and take steps to ensure you don't repeat the mistake in the future. For example, you might immediately set up a reminder on your mobile phone for all your future bill payments. Your essential capacity for critical thought and your ability to learn from these slip-ups remains completely intact. This is a perfectly normal, occasional error in judgment. It doesn't compromise the overall suitability of your behaviour, nor does it threaten your financial security or general well-being. You are perfectly aware of the consequences of your actions, even if you occasionally act a little bit on impulse. With Alzheimer's disease, we observe a fundamentally different situation. It's not just the odd, isolated mistake. It's a systematic, progressive decline in the ability to make sensible decisions. This happens because of damage to the frontal part of the brain, the area responsible for what we call executive functions, things like planning ahead, assessing risks, and controlling impulses. A person might start spending vast sums of money on completely unnecessary items, or they might easily fall victim to scams, simply because they lose that critical ability to think things through. They may also stop looking after their personal hygiene. And it's crucial to understand this isn't down to laziness, but because they genuinely no longer grasp why keeping clean is necessary. Another very common and noticeable example is inappropriate clothing choices. They might put on a heavy winter coat in the scorching heat, or perhaps walk outside in freezing weather wearing just a shirt. This happens because their brain can no longer properly assess the surrounding environment and make the appropriate safe decision. This particular symptom is one of the most alarming, simply because it poses a direct risk to a person's safety and security. While forgetting a name is frustrating, failing to spot a sophisticated scam, or con, could mean losing their entire life savings. And though misplacing the keys is merely annoying, leaving the gas hob on or the front door unlocked could easily lead to a genuine tragedy. It's vital we understand this isn't just quirkiness or simply old age setting in. This is a measurable symptom of the disease, a consequence of vital cell death in the brain's prefrontal cortex. The person isn't choosing to be unreasonable. They genuinely cannot process information in the same way. Their brain has essentially lost the tools needed to analyse the situation and forecast the potential consequences. They are living moment to moment, unable to build a logical chain that connects cause and effect. This is why managing both their finances and ensuring household safety becomes absolutely crucial, even in the very early stages of the illness. Let's use that analogy again, shall we, just to make things absolutely clear. Imagine that decision-making is like steering a ship. A healthy person is the experienced captain at the helm. Now, they might occasionally choose a less than ideal course due to a heavy fog or a sudden squall, but they have the chart in front of them. They know where they're heading, and crucially, They can correct their mistake. They are in command of that vessel. A person suffering from Alzheimer's, however, is someone on a ship without a rudder and without charts. They are simply drifting with the current. They can't plot a course. They can't steer clear of the reefs because the very instruments they need to navigate are broken. They might even execute completely chaotic and dangerous manoeuvres because they are no longer the captain. They are merely a passenger on an unmanageable craft. It is this fundamental loss of control over their own life and their decisions that truly separates this illness from typical human error or poor judgment. Let's now turn our attention to the fifth and perhaps most subtle and often overlooked distinction. The difference between temporary changes in mood and lasting changes in personality. We all know life has its peaks and valleys, don't we? We might get a bit cross because of a fuss at work, feel low after a disagreement with a loved one, or simply be weary and apathetic from sheer exhaustion. These are perfectly normal, understandable reactions to external circumstances. Our moods will naturally ebb and flow, but our fundamental personality, our basic character, remains constant. We know our own routines, our core values, and the general way we tend to respond to the world around us. If you are naturally a level-headed, calm person, even when faced with a highly stressful situation, you are likely to seek a constructive solution rather than dissolving into a panic or a tantrum. These temporary shifts in mood are predictable and entirely explainable. They are, quite simply, part and parcel of a healthy emotional life. Alzheimer's disease brings about profound, often inexplicable changes in personality. Someone who has always been the life and soul of the party might suddenly become withdrawn and deeply apathetic. Conversely, the calm, steady family member you know can transform into a suspicious, constantly anxious, or even aggressive person. These dramatic shifts happen without any obvious external trigger. A person may start accusing loved ones of theft simply because they cannot recall where they placed an item. They may sink into deep depression or experience sudden, unexplained episodes of sheer terror. It feels as though their very identity has been replaced. They simply stop being the person you knew. This happens because the disease doesn't just attack the memory centres, it also damages the limbic system. That's the part of the brain responsible for controlling our emotions and behaviour. We must remember this isn't a case of a bad temper or failing character. It is a crucial symptom of brain destruction. Why are these changes so tricky, so insidious? It's because they are so easy to dismiss as something mundane. We often say things like, "Oh, Dad's just getting on a bit, he's become grumpy," or "Mum was always a little bit anxious, and it's just flared up lately." For years, family members may fail to realise that these aren't just personality quirks, but actually signs of an underlying medical condition. The real difficulty arises when the person starts becoming highly suspicious and distrustful. They might refuse all help, hide their struggles, and even accuse the people closest to them. This places an enormous emotional strain on the whole family unit. It is vital to remember that these changes aren't driven by bad intent or spite, but by an illness. The individual truly cannot control these emotions. Their brain is sending them distorted signals, making them perceive threats where absolutely none exist. Showing empathy and understanding in this situation is far more crucial than trying to argue, reconvince them, or prove that they are wrong. Let's wrap up this part with a final common myth. That myth is, "Oh, it's just depression." Not true, Alzheimer's. It's true, symptoms like depression and apathy can mimic the early signs of dementia quite closely. What's more, depression itself is actually considered a risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease later on. But there is one critical difference. A person suffering primarily from depression will usually complain about their failing memory. They are genuinely distressed about their state. They'll often say, "Doctor, I keep forgetting things. Something isn't right." Someone with early dementia, conversely, often denies their difficulties or genuinely doesn't notice them, a condition known as sognosia. If you ask them about their memory, their standard reply might be, "I'm perfectly fine, thank you very much." It's usually the family or close relatives who first start raising the alarm. Of course, only a doctor can provide a precise diagnosis after a full, comprehensive assessment. But this key difference in how a person perceives, or fails to perceive, their own problems is a very important diagnostic marker that we should all pay attention to. Right then, let's have a quick recap, shall we? We've gone through the 5 key differences. Firstly, normal forgetfulness is forgetting a small detail, whereas Alzheimer's means forgetting the entire event altogether. Secondly, with a normal memory lapse, you can usually trace back your steps, but with Alzheimer's, you can find yourself completely lost in a familiar place. Thirdly, we might struggle to find the right word, but we know exactly what we want to say. The disease, however, starts destroying the actual vocabulary itself. Fourthly, we all make mistakes, of course, but Alzheimer's often leads to a systematic pattern of dangerous or just plain illogical decisions. And fifth, our mood changes based on circumstances, but with Alzheimer's, the personality itself changes entirely, often for no obvious reason. The key takeaway here, the most vital point to remember, is this. It's not about those single, isolated incidents. What truly matters is the pattern, the frequency, and how these symptoms begin to impact your daily routine. If you notice these systematic manifestations, either in yourself or in your dear ones, please don't ignore them. There's absolutely no need for panic, but it is a strong reason to speak to your GP, who can then refer you to a specialist, like a neurologist or geriatrician. Early diagnosis might not cure the disease, but it certainly helps slow down its progression and can significantly improve the quality of life for everyone involved. Thank you so much for watching this important video all the way to the end. If you found it helpful, please do give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future discussions on brain health. Now, a question for you. Have you or anyone close to you experienced situations like these? Which of these 5 differences did you find the most surprising or the most crucial? Sharing your experience in the comments below really helps others who might be going through the same thing